Hello friends and welcome back. We are doing part 3 of this UMG drag and drop tutorial stream here. We have a lot to cover in this video, but we should be able to finish everything up. Ran through this a couple times now. We should be able to get this done in just about an hour's time. So we're going to jump right in actually. Again, if you are brand new to this stream, if you missed the 2 previous streams, let me go ahead and show you again real quick what we're trying to work on here together. So if I play in the editor, here is our action bar down at the bottom of the screen. We have some pickups in our level. I can run over and pick them up and they get added to an inventory. If I press I on my keyboard, there's a little inventory menu that comes up. We can drag our inventory menu around on screen wherever we want using our drag and drop functionality. We can do the same thing for our action bar. We can move it around wherever we want on our screen. We can actually lock it so that we can't move it around or unlock it. And then what we want to get to in this video, and actually in the previous video, we set up the ability to swap items around inside of our inventory so we can move things around inside of our quote-unquote bag there. And in this video, what we're going to do is allow you to drag items from the inventory down to our action bar now so that we can place them on our action bar like so. And that same functionality that we set up in our inventory here, allow you to swap things around on your action bar like so, something like this. And then finally being able to drag items off the action bar. So just dragging out into space over here to remove it from our action bar or from our inventory. So if we have multiple things on our action bar here and we want to delete this item from our inventory, dragging it off into space will remove all the items that are placed on our action bar as well as the item in the inventory. And then finally, being able to do cool stuff whenever we use our action bar. So that's the end goal. In the previous video, we got to the point, as I mentioned, here is our project from the previous video. We got to the point where we can pick up an item and then move it around inside of our inventory. That's where we got. We're going to go to dropping items inside of our action bar now. But I did want to mention in between videos, I noticed some forum posts about this, and I noticed as watching the stream myself, transitioning from video stream 1 to video stream 2. I noticed there were a couple of things that we said we did in video 1 that we intended to get to, but we didn't necessarily do so. So I kind of wanted to backtrack just a little bit before we jump into this session. For those, when this video series gets completed and posted, we can add some annotations so that you can click and jump ahead and get all the elements that you need so that you won't get a little bit mixed up on some of the things that we missed. So we're going to jump into those first to kind of clear up some confusion there, and then we'll start continuing moving forward. So the first thing that we're going to do inside of our project here, the first thing that I noticed actually in the very first training stream, when we created our assets, we created our My Player Controller blueprint. Again, if this is you coming to this third video now to get the updates, we created our My Player Controller. We set up some stuff inside of it. However, we actually didn't go to our first-person game mode and open that up and assign our My Player Controller blueprint that we just created. So you're going to want to make sure that in your game mode, you open it up, go to My Player Controller class here, click this drop down, and make sure that you actually use the Player Controller blueprint that we created. That would probably help. Once you do so, compile and save, and then you can close that out. So just wanted to mention that. The other thing that I noticed, speaking of the Player Controller blueprint, if we open that up real quick, we'll run through the changes in here that we missed. So we set up some script in here. We set up the event graph, and we set up our variables. However, we did not set up these functions. I thought we set these up as part of our prep work. We didn't necessarily go into each of these and define what each of these functions do, but I thought that we set these up, but we didn't. So I'm going to run through these really quickly so that you can see what the functions are so that you can access them a little bit later. So the very first one, again, we can click the Add Function button. The very first one is called Inventory Check. And if I move my details panel up just a little bit, when we create this function, down in the output section, we created an output Boolean called hasSpace. And all this function is going to do for us is check, as the name suggests, check if we have enough space in our inventory to pick up an item. So that's what that function does for us, if you want to go ahead and create that. The next one that we created was called Pickup Item. And what this does for us, we're going to call some script inside of this function to actually pick the item up. So down in the details panel, we added an input of the object type, and we just call it item to pick up because we're going to pass that through. The very next one is called Find Empty Slot. And we use this to determine where inside of our inventory system. So if this is our inventory system, these 3 slots here, where inside of our inventory, where is an empty slot in here? Because this spot could be empty and we could have 2 items here. We could have 1 here and 1 there and this spot be empty. So we need to find a spot inside of our inventory bag, quote unquote bag, that is empty. And we're using this function to do that. And we also, down in the details panel, made sure that this was a pure function. So if I drag this into the graph, it's not like your traditional functions. It's just got an output. It's just going to spit out wherever that empty spot is inside of our inventory. So we made sure that our find empty spot is checked as pure. And we also added an integer output called index, because that's going to tell us the spot that's empty. Then there was a couple more. There's the move item. I think we started touching this in the previous video, but we did not set the function up in the first video. So this is probably where you may have got a little bit lost. Hopefully this will clear this up. So the move item function, we added 2 inputs. We need to know where we're coming from and where we're going to, and those are both going to be integers. And then the output is just a Boolean that we called swapping, because we need to know if we are moving an item in our inventory to a position in our inventory that already has an item there, because we need to know that so that we can get that item that we are moving to, store it as a temp object, and then move that to our from, so that where we came from, those 2 items get swapped. And that kind of goes along the same lines as our move image function that we created. We created some inputs for this. So where we're coming from, where are we going to, those are both integers. Our item image, this is the thumbnail that appears. It's a texture 2D variable type. And then we're passing through from our move item this swapping. So we're going to have a swapping Boolean input as well. So that's the move image. And then there was 2 more functions that we missed, and we're going to wrap this up. The first was called remove item. And this has a couple inputs on it, 2 integers. We have one for the inventory slot, where it sits inside of our inventory, and then action slot, where it sits on our action bar. Because we need to know this whenever we're removing items. Where does it sit inside of our inventory menu so that we can accurately pull it? And where does it sit on our action bar? And then we also need a reference to the image that exists in those positions. So we created a texture 2D called pickup item image. And then finally, this one is called item is used. This is just a straightforward one. It has 1 input, and it has a slot or integer called slot used. This is referencing whenever we use the item, we need to know where in our inventory that item exists and where on our action bar it exists. So those are the functions that we missed. I just wanted to recap that really quickly in case you were a little bit confused on that in the second video. There's 2 other things that I wanted to bring up real quick, and then we'll get to one of the questions that you had. Actually, we're going to answer that here in a moment as well, that was posted on the forums. So if we go into our UI folder here, and we open our action slot, so we open it up, this is the button that appears on our action bar. So we set this up. We defined a button, we defined the size box, we defined the image that appears in our slot. However, if we go back to our level editor viewport and we go to our inventory slot, we didn't actually set this one up. I thought that we did because they are very, very similar. In fact, they're identical actually in terms of setup. So I thought we set this up, but we didn't as well. So I wanted to run through that really quickly as well. So as you can see, for the action slot, which we are currently on now, so we're on the action slot, it has a button, has a size box, and has an image. Our inventory slot is going to have the same thing. We're just going to take a button. If you had the canvas panel there before, go ahead and delete that. Just take a button from the palette, left click and drag it and drop it down on top of the inventory slot here. Then take a size box from the panel section. So take a size box, just left click and drag that on top of your button. And then finally, we're going to use an image to represent our thumbnails inside of our inventory. We're going to take an image, left click, drag and drop that on top of your size box. Now, if we click the size box, actually, we can go to the details panel, the far right over here. We can specify its dimensions for the width and the height. We went ahead and did that just as we did with our action slot. So we click our size box, click both checkbox here, set those both to 64 by 64. We're going to do the same thing on our inventory slot widget here. So with our size box selected, check both the width override and height override, set those both to 64 by 64. And then there was 1 or 2 more things actually with the designer tab that we need to address. The first is on our button. If we go to the details panel and scroll all the way down, again, this is something that we did in our action slot. Select our button and we scroll all the way down, we need to change the interaction method. So we've already done this in this video, but we're just recapping for those that are coming to this series fresh so they can get this as well. On our interaction here, by default, it's set to down, the click method down and up. We want to change this to precise click because this is what we need for the drag and drop operation to work. As you see in the tooltip there, allows for drag and droppable buttons. So we need to make sure that this is set to precise click. And then if you're using touch input, you can change this to precise tap. And then the is focusable here, if you mouse over it says, should this only be mouse clickable and never keyboard focus? We uncheck this in case you want to do that as well. So that's what we need to set up for our button. The last thing that we need to do for the designer tab for this is bind an image for this. So our individual inventory with all those slots, they're going to be variable images. So the image that appears on there is going to be a variable. We actually bound this to a property, similar to what we did on our action slot. So on our action slot, we actually created a function, but on the inventory slot, we can hop over to the graph, and let me go to the event graph here. We can create a brand new variable and call it inventory image. Make sure that it is of the texture 2D type, that it is publicly editable and exposed on spawn, etc. Then you can go ahead and compile, hop back to the designer tab, and then with your image selected, you can now click this drop down next to brush, and it should see your inventory image that you could specify here. So whenever we change this property, the image on this, this button will get updated. So that's all we need to do for the designer tab. There was a little bit of script in here that we didn't do as well that we're going to go through really quickly. Starting on the event graph here, just getting references to our player controller and our player character. So we, on the event construct here, we right-clicked in the graph, got a player controller, dragged off of it, and casted to my player controller, our player controller blueprint. Then we right-clicked on this pin here, promoted to a variable, which we called controller reference. Then we did the same thing for our player character. Right-clicked in the graph and get the player character, drag off and cast to first-person character or third-person character or whatever your character blueprint is, cast to that blueprint. Once you've done so, right-click on this pin. Well, excuse me, let's actually drag off this pin and get the HUD reference. So where we are creating our HUD, and then right-click on this pin and promote that to a variable called HUD reference. So that's all we did on the event graph, is just get reference to our player controller and our player character. We did also create one more variable in the variable section called inventory slot, just as we did with our action. Created a variable called action slot. So in our inventory slot, this inventory slot variable is of the integer type. It's editable, it's exposed on spawn, and we're using this to define where this button sits inside of our inventory. So that's why we need to have this, and we need to make sure that it's publicly editable. From there, we did our drag and drop operation. So if I expand both of these, if we go to the function section and click this drop down for the override, we overwrote the on mouse button down, the on drag detected, and on drop detected, just as we did with our action slot. So here's our action slot again, on mouse button down, on drag, and on drop. So inside of our inventory slot, it's very, very similar. On our mouse button down, if we double click and open up that function, we just dragged off the mouse event here. Detect drag if pressed is the node that we're looking for. We set that to the left mouse button, and then we connected our return value like so. On the drag detected, so if we go into under the drag and drop section, again, that's just from the override here. We searched for on drag detected. If we open that up, there's a little bit of script in here that's marginally different. All of this is the same. It's just this extra bit down here that we added. So if we open up our action slot and we go to on drag detected, first thing that we did was check if there's an action image for our action slot. In our inventory, we're checking to see if there's an inventory image. So on drag detected, we hold control, drag in our inventory image is valid as we're checking on the branch here. If we determine that we do have an image inside of our inventory, then we're going to go ahead and create the drag and drop widget. So that dragged item widget, so we just create a widget, click the drop down and change that to dragged item. And then specify the inventory image as the dragged item here. From there, we right click and we say create drag and drop operation. So you just right click and you can type create create drag, and it should give you the drag and drop operation, like so. When you select that, you can change the class dropdown, which we changed to item drag, like so, just as we did here. So we changed it to item drag. And then we just need to populate it with the things that we're going to be dragging. So we're taking our inventory slot variable that we created, plugging that into slot index, our inventory image, plugging that into the item image. The return value of our created drag widget here is our default drag visual. We also want to make sure that we're set to mouse down for the pivot point. And then finally, we want to make sure that from inventory is checked. And then actually, the last thing that we need to do is provide the actual item that is being dragged as part of our inventory. So from our inventory, I should say. So what we did is take our controller reference that we created, control dragged it into the graph, drag off of it, get the inventory objects. From that, perform a get, and the item that you want to get is going to correspond to the inventory slot that we dragged from our inventory. Once we have that, we'll know the item that we want to pass through as the dragged item. So with all of that up, I'll leave that up for just a second here. With all of that up, we want to also make sure that our return value is plugged in like so. And our on drag detected should be very similar to our action slot on drag detected, except for this script here and the variables that change, obviously. And then finally in this blueprint, we had the on drop. And this is where we actually decide to drop items inside of our inventory menu. What we did for this, on the on drop here, we're dragging off the operation and we're casting to item drag so that we can access the variables inside of it that we're passing through. From there, we dragged off item drag and we're checking to see if we're dragging from the inventory. And then that Boolean value is used as a branch, like so. Off the true, inside of our controller reference, a moment ago, we just mentioned that we created some functions called move item and move image. We're calling those two functions now, which will allow us to move the item around inside of our inventory as well as move the image. We're also passing through where we're coming from. So if I mouse over this, where we're coming from is our slot index that we pass through on our item drag here. Where we're going to, so if we highlight that, is our inventory slot. So we just drag that in and connect it like so. And the same thing on our move image over here. So we have our from is coming from our slot index that we're passing through. Our to is coming from that inventory slot variable that we created. And we also want to make sure that from our move item to our move image, we're passing through if we are swapping or not. So are we swapping positions with another item? We need to know, so we're passing that through as well. Last thing we did off the false, I just added a reroute node. I probably should have did some reroute nodes here as well to kind of clean this up a little bit, but passing that through to the false just so that we can say that this event has been handled. So with that, let's actually close this out because that's all we need to talk about in there. The final thing that we missed actually is if we go back to the main level editor here, and we go to our action bar. So we go ahead and open that up. Our action bar, we hop to the event graph, or to the graph. Upon event construct, we did this for our inventory menu. So if we open up our inventory menu, and we go to the graph. So here's the graph. Towards the end of our event construct here, we created a reference to all of those buttons that sit inside of our inventory. We made an array out of those called inventory buttons. We didn't necessarily do that for our action bar, so you're going to want to go ahead and do that as well. So just hold control and drag in each of your buttons that represent all of the buttons on your action bar. Once you have all of those in your graph here, right click and create an array. Just make array like so. And then add the pins that you need that correspond to the number of buttons that you have, connect them all up. Then right click on this pin and promote that to a variable, which we called action buttons. So with all of that out of the way, I know that was a little bit of stuff that we missed. I apologize for that. We are not robots here at Epic, so we are prone to mistakes. So apologize for that, but that should clear up some things. Again, once all three of these videos are set up, you'll be able to jump ahead to see all the things that we kind of skipped over a little bit and can recount and put those in so it'll make the process a little bit smoother. So with that, there's a couple questions I see coming up. There's one question that I wanted to answer before we jump into finishing off our system here. So let me go ahead and play in the editor here. So if I press I, one of the questions that came up is if I move my inventory around, there's a little bit of a pop as I move it into place here. One of the questions was how to get rid of this. So I spoke to one of our programmers here to kind of identify what was going on here, because I wasn't quite sure myself why it was doing this. So we sat down, we talked about it, and we have a solution. So we're going to show this here in a moment. So what we're looking to achieve is something like this. So when we move our action bar, it doesn't pop into place. It sits exactly where we let it go. So again, here's our action bar, little bit of pop. So if this is what you're looking for, is a more precise drop, I'll show you how we set that up. We were very close. If we go into our, let's see, our action bar here. So down on the content browser, here's our action bar. Go to the graph, and over in the My Blueprint panel, if we expand the mouse and drag and drop operations here, if we go to the on mouse button down, what we had here before is we set the offset on mouse button down. So we were setting the position of where we want our window to appear whenever we click the mouse button down. We actually needed to do this inside of our drag. So when we are performing the drag, once we start dragging, get the offset that we want to use to position our window when we drop it and pass that through. Now it's a little bit misleading because the pivot point here says mouse down. And speaking with the programmer, he actually mentioned this as well. He is investigating if we can do it on the mouse down, pass this information through, or if we need to actually change this to something a little bit more descriptive, if it needs to say mouse drag instead of down, because we need to do this on drag. So what we've done is take this script here that was sitting inside of our mouse button down and moved it over to our on drag detected instead. And that will give us a smoother movement. We can actually do that together here really quickly because I didn't do it for the inventory, just to show you. So let's go ahead and open up our inventory, inventory, and on the graph, let's go ahead and expand the mouse section and drag and drop. Open up on mouse button down, open that up. There's that offset that we created on mouse button down that we need to move to on drag detected here. So we're going to do that. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to take all of this and hit Control C, then delete it, and then make sure that I reconnect all of this up, like so. I'm going to go to on drag detected now, paste all of that, and just move it down and connect it up like so. So we do need to hook up our geometry and pointer events here, so let's just reconnect those. So there we go. Let's just move this over just a little bit. So we're still passing through our drag window offset. You probably could have just connected this right in like so, but we'll leave it like that. So now if we compile, we save, and we play, our inventory should do the same thing as our action bar now. So if I press I, here's our action menu. So I drag it around, drops exactly where we let it go. Our inventory menu is no longer popping into place. So that was one of the questions I seen on the forums. So I got an answer to that in speaking with the programmer today. So with all of that, I think we are good to continue now. We're going to continue finishing off our system here. And what we're going to do now is actually set up the ability to drag items from our inventory menu down into our action bar. There's a couple questions. Let's see if I can get to these really quickly. Could UMG be used for a flipbook style system? I don't see why not. I don't know in what context, but I don't see why that couldn't be a possibility. Maybe that's something we can explore in another video, turning this into a flipbook style or paper 2D style version. And let's see, the next question, if I want to interact with the action slot and inventory slot via gamepad, do I need to set is focusable checkbox? So on the action slot, let's actually see that on the graph. So on our button here, this is what they're referring to. So is focusable. Sometimes a button should only be mouse clickable and never keyboard focused. In my experiences in playing with this, unchecking this is the method of using gamepad interaction. There's a little bit extra work that you need to do for that as well. I'm hoping to actually cover that in another training stream with another colleague of mine here. We want to kind of demonstrate some 3D widgets as well as being able to support gamepad support. So I would look for that in another video stream. We can cover that a little bit more extensively. This one's more focused on just the keyboard for now, but unchecking this, you should be able to do that, but there's a little bit extra that you need to do to register button events. So with that out of the way, let's actually continue. So make sure that we can get through all of everything we need to get to. So first thing that we're going to do is, let's actually move this over. We're going to go down to the content browser, the UI folder. We're going to open that up. And we're going to go into the action slot widget blueprint. So let's go ahead and double click, open that up. And inside here, we're going to go over to the graph. And we're going to go and expand our mouse section and drag and drop section. And we actually need the on drop here. So if I double click on this, this is where we left off. This should look a little bit more familiar. As I mentioned, in between video 1 and video 2, I grabbed the wrong project. For this video, we should be on track because I watched both training streams. Project that you are looking at is a result of going through both training streams. So this should be a little bit more familiar. So what we need to do here is, this is the on drop functionality. So when we are dropping an item inside of our action bar, we're going to be moving things around. So we're going to create a function to handle moving things around. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go over to my blueprint panel, and we're going to create a brand new function. And this function is going to be called move image, like so. And it's going to have quite a few inputs on it, actually. So if we go back to the on drop, we're going to need inputs for all of these here. So we're going to create some inputs. And the inputs that we will need are, let's see, let's just create all the inputs. So we're going to need, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inputs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the first one, let's just run right through these down the list here. We're going to need to know where we're going to. So we're going to first call this one to. We'll come back and set the types in a moment. Where are we going, or where are we coming from? So where are we coming from? We're also going to need a reference to the image that we are moving. So image. And then finally, we need to know, are we moving from the inventory? So is from inventory. And then also, are we swapping? So is swapping. And by swapping, I mean, are we swapping positions with another object on our action bar? So we need to know if we're coming from the inventory down to our action bar, or if we're swapping items on our action bar. So let's change the properties for these. Let's actually not close that. Let's click this drop down. Let's change this to an integer type. This one's also going to be an integer. This one here is actually going to be a texture 2D. So we're going to change that to texture 2D. Like so. And then these two down here are both going to be Boolean, so we can leave those as is. So now that we have this function, actually, we can just drag this whole function into the graph, like so. There's all of our inputs. We can connect this up, like so. Now we can connect all of these information that we're passing through as part of our drag and drop to our move image. So we're going to take the action slot. That's where we're going to. The slot index is where we're coming from. The item image is the image that we're passing through. Then we're passing through whether or not we're moving from our inventory. And then finally, we set up action image is valid. The place that we are moving to, is there already an action image there? That will tell us if we're swapping or not. So our move image is set up. We still need to set the script for this up, which we'll do in a moment. The last thing that we'll do as part of this on drop here, we'll drag off this node and we'll say set default button. So set default button at the very top here. Click that, and then we can connect our return node. And if we double click on this set default button, all this does is call a custom event inside of our graph, which handles the button styling, which we're going to touch again in a moment here. So now that we set that up, let's actually go into our move image here. There's going to be some stuff that we need to do in here. So let's actually just double click and open our move image up. And again, this is just a matter of preference. The way that I usually like to work is to create local variables for all of our things that we're passing through as part of this function. You could just as easily drag wires all across your graph here. But for our purposes, we're going to create some local variables. And I promise I will connect them this time. So yeah, no more missing connections. I promise that won't happen this time. So the first local variable that we're going to create is called local2. Next local variable that we're going to create is called local_from. We also need to know the local image, so we're going to call this one a local image. And then we also need to pass through, or a local image, not local image, local swapping. That's the other one that we need. So let's create that. Local swapping, like so. Make sure that I got them all. Like so. Okay, let's actually change the types of these as well too, before I forget. So local2 is going to be an integer. Local_from, also going to be an integer. The local image is going to be a texture 2D. The local swapping is still going to be a Boolean. For this one, do we need to create one for the is from inventory? I don't think we do. Just looking at my notes say I do, so I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think we need it, but we'll create one just in case. So one more local variable called local inventory. So we'll create this as a Boolean. Again, I don't think we need this, but I'm going to create it just in case. So what we're going to do, let's take our local variables and plug those in. So we're going to take our local2, drag and drop that onto 2, take our local_from onto from, take our local image, plug that in, and then our local swapping, oops, that's inventory, plug that in, like so. I'm just going to move these all around, connect these up. And let's make sure that we connect these this time. So now looking at my notes, I don't have that. I'm going to leave it out. I'm going to leave it out. So our local inventory, let's actually just kill that, because we're only going to check this once actually. We only need to know once if we are moving an item on our action bar. Are we coming from the inventory down to our action bar, or are we moving items on our action bar around? So we're just going to branch right here. So we're going to hold B and left click, create a branch, connect this up like so. And we're going to take our is from inventory. We're going to plug that directly in. We don't need to create a local variable for that. So just plug that in just like so. And if we determine that we are coming directly from our inventory down to our action bar, we'll work on that first. So that will be the true. So we'll work on that first. To kind of save a little bit of time, we're going to create one quick function. So we're going to hop over to my blueprint panel, create a function. This function is going to be called getButton. This is going to help us get the button that we need to access here. So just call it getButton. It's going to have some inputs and outputs on it. So let's go ahead and add those. It's going to have one input and one output. Input is going to be an integer. It's going to have the integer type. The input, we'll just call it slot, like so. The output is going to be an action slot. So let's click this drop down and say action slot, like so. It's the actual button. So we'll call it button, like so. And you'll see why we're doing this in a moment. So all we're going to do, we're going to take our, let's compile real quick. Before we can do this, actually, we need to do one more thing, I think. So we have our head reference. Is it down there hiding? There it is. So let's go back to our get button. It's hiding. So we need to take our head reference here. Just going to hold control and drag that into the graph. Again, we're on the get button function here. Just going to drag off of this now and say get action bar. And from our action bar, we can get our action buttons. So get action buttons, like so. Once we have those, we can drag off of this and say get. So we're just doing a get now. The button that we want to get is going to correspond to the button that we are getting. So let's just plug that in and plug that in. So that's going to get passed through. So what we can do with this now, and you'll see why we're going to do this in a moment. If we go back to our move image function, so we're in our move image function. Inside this, what we can do now off the true is call this get button function. Just drag this into the graph, connect this up, and the button that we want to get is going to be our local2. Just plug that in. Now we don't need to perform that script here. We can just call this function to execute that script for us to get the actual button that we need. Once we have that button, we can drag off of this and say set action image. So we're setting the action image on that button. Connect this up. and it's asking for an input. The input that we're going to provide is the image that we're passing through here as part of the drag and drop. So our local image, that's going to get passed through like so. So I'm going to add a quick comment around this and hit C. Well, not around our branch. Delete this comment. Just around these nodes here, hit C, and this is replaces action bar button with item from inventory. Like so. Let's go ahead and just move that over. So that's if we are pulling from the inventory down to the action bar. We now need to determine if we're on our action bar and we're moving things around, are we swapping with another item? So we need to run a check for that. So we're going to hold B and left click to create a branch. Going to connect this up. Created that local swapping variable, so we're just going to take our local swapping here, drag that in, drop it on top like so. Going to take our get button function here, just going to hit Control C to copy it, Control V to paste it, because we're going to call that again here off the true. And we could also grab the 2 as well, so let's hit Control C, Control V and paste that, connect that up. So that we get the place that we are moving to. Now, before we start actually setting what should be in this position, we need to get a reference to what is currently there. And this is kind of what we talked about in the previous video. We're moving one item to another position. Before we actually set the item's new position, we need to get what was there before, store that somewhere so that we can move that back to the place in which we came. So we need to drag off of our button here and get whatever is there. So we're getting the action image. Like so. Let me move this down just a little bit. We do need one more local variable. So one more local variable. This is the local temp image. And it is of the texture 2D type. So it's texture 2D. So that's what we're going to set here. So we're just going to left click and drag and drop that on top so that we set a reference to that we can call in a moment. So we can connect that up. Now that we have reference to it, we can drag off of our button again. Now we can set action image. So we're setting the action image now. I'm going to connect that up to that, to that. And we are going to use the image that we are passing through as part of the drag and drop. So our local image, just going to drop it on top like so. Move that down underneath. And once we've moved from, or once we move to, now we need to set the image for where we came from. So we're going to take our get button here, hit Control C, Control V to paste it, hook this up, like so. Take our local from, because that's now what we want to update. Drop that on the slot like so. So. And for this, we're going to set the action image again. So set action image. So set the action image. That's what we're looking for. Connect this up. Now we're going to use that local temp that we just set a moment ago. So we're going to take our local temp image, plug and drop that in. So this will move the item in the position that we moved to back to the position in which we came. So we're almost done. There's one more thing that we need to do on this particular script here. So I'm going to add a comment around this real quick. Hit C. Used when we are swapping items on the action bar with another item. That's what we are doing in this instance of script here. And then finally, we need to, if we are swapping items on our action bar with a spot that doesn't have anything in it. So that's what we need to handle next. So for that, we can take both of these here, our local 2 and our get button. Just hit Control C, Control V, move that down just a little bit. Connect up the false, like so. And all we're going to do for this, drag off this, set action image. Connect this up. And we're using the local image. So I'm going to take that, plug that in. Like so. And then for the position in which we came, we just need to nullify that. So all we're going to do is get our button, hit Control C and Control V to paste it, hook it up. Where are we coming from? So we're going to get our local from, click and drag and drop that down on like so. And what we're going to do for this is drag off of our button here and say set action image. And we're going to leave it blank. That will set it to null at that point, which is what we want. The last thing that we need to do when we are setting a button to null, we need to also tell our button to use its default button style, so the grayed out appearance. So we're going to drag off of our button again, and we're going to say get button. But we're not going to use the function. We're getting the actual button at this point. So we're getting the actual button here, like so. We're going to drag off of this and say set style. So now we are defining the style of the button that we came from, and we're going to change that back to its default value. So we're going to hook all this up. And we can set the default value right here from the details panel. We have our variables that we created. It's going to take our default button style, click, drag, and drop that on top of our widget style like so. So I'm going to add a comment around all of this, hit C, and say used when swapping with an empty slot. Well, if I could spell slot, that would probably help. Something like that would probably help. So we are set. There's one thing that we need to verify real quick. If we go to our on drop, which we already set that up. Okay, we already set that up. So we have our on drop function. We need our get button. We did that. We did all of that. The last thing I want to do before we test actually, let's set our button styles. I noticed this as well. If we scroll up a little bit, we go down to the default values here. We didn't actually set these. We created these variables, but we didn't define a value for these yet. So let's actually just do that real quick so we can kind of see a little bit better what's happening here. So first we'll start out with the enabled button style. So this means we have an item in our action bar. What does the button actually look like? So we're going to click this drop down. Move this up again. Click this drop down for our enabled button style. We're going to leave normal to white. We're going to leave press to white. All we're going to change is the hovered. So when we hover over this, it will change colors. So I'm going to click this, and let's make it like a yellowish color or something like so. So it automatically assigned that. Again, here it is. I'm actually going to click on this tint here, take this yellow, and move it up to our color picker here, just so we can use the same color, because we're going to need it in a moment. So we have normal white, hovered yellow, and our pressed white as well. Feel free to change these whatever you want, but this is just the method that we're using if you want to follow along. Now for our drag over style, this is when we are dragging a widget over this item in our action bar if we're getting ready to swap with it. We're actually just going to set the normal on this. We're going to leave the hovered and pressed as is. We're going to hop down to the normal for this. We're going to click this drop down, and then under tint, we're going to use our yellow color because we want it to appear yellow when we're hovering over an item in our action bar. Then finally, we have our default button style. We can go ahead and click this drop down. For these are currently all set to white. I'm going to click the normal here, expand that. We're actually going to, let's click this here, the tint. We can use the color picker here, but I noticed also in between videos, we set our RGB to 0.14, which is fine, but it kind of blended in with our background. So I'm going to be super nitpicky here. Go back in and zero out our RGB values so that it's just an alpha of 0.25. So I may have to do this once. So bear with me real quick, where I set all of these to 0. So RGB is 0. Let's actually set the tint here. So we'll set the G to 0, and we'll also set the B to 0 as well. Like so. And then what we're also going to do is, let's actually do it one more time. Go down to our normal. We're going to take this color that we've just selected. We're going to use that a little bit later. So let's take the new here and drag it up to the top. You can see it's a little bit darker than the default one that we were using, so it just looks a little bit better. So with that, we have reference to the color that we want to use. Now we can hop down to the hovered. We're going to do the same thing. So click the tint, change it to that darker color, and then one more time, the pressed, the tint, that darker color. So it should look like this. So with all of that, let's compile. Let's go to the event graph. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit because I want to kind of demonstrate something here. And if we play in the editor now, let's actually play. And let's actually run over and pick up one of our items. Hit Shift F1 to bring this over just a little bit more. If we press I and we drag an item down to our action bar, you can see now it goes yellow when we move over them, which is what we want instead of white. We can drop it inside. We can hover over it now. It turns yellow when we mouse over it. can move it around inside of our action bar, which is what we want. If we go and pick up another item, we can move this item down to our action bar. We can actually swap positions with the two, but notice what happened to our other action bar here. It lost its color setting there. So what we need to do to fix this actually, if we hit escape, inside of our action slot, we're on the event graph. There's one thing that we're going to change. So down on our event on drag leave here, we're going to disconnect this. So I'm going to hold Alt, left click, disconnect this. I'm actually going to kill this. We don't need this actually. So I'm going to hit that, hit delete. And I'm going to move this up here and connect it like so. So what we are now saying is when we drag an item into an action slot, we are going to check if there's already an item there. If there's already an item there, then we're going to set the enabled button style. If there's not an item there when we drag into an empty slot, then we'll set the default button style. What we were doing a moment ago was on the event drag leave, regardless of whether or not there was an item there, we were setting the default button style, which gave us that effect that we probably didn't want. So we want to move this up here to kind of fix that. So how are we on time? Moving right along. Let's check our questions. Let's see. No questions. Can we also add 3D items as local variables? Can we also add 3D, like a transform or a vector? You should be able to do that as a local variable and expose it as well. You could actually probably, if I go, let's see, I'll show it real quick. There's a property called, where is it? Well, I guess I would have to create a 3D widget or transform. Let's just create it real quick. This is to answer one of the questions that's come up. It's, can we also add 3D items as local variables? Form, so we make it a transform. Show 3D widget. Oh, sorry, can you do it for this? Maybe it's vectors. I think it's just vectors actually. For vectors, you could click this option and then you can actually have a widget you can adjust inside of the viewport as well. So short answer, yes, you should be able to do that. We just didn't do it for our case here. Maybe when we get into 3D widgets, we'll tackle that at that time. So we are moving right along. We are almost done. We are currently to the point where we can pick up items. We can press I. Oops. We can drag them down to our action bar, move them around inside of our action bar, which is all fine and dandy. So we set up the script to be able to move this around. We can take this, move it down here. We can move these around like so. So it's all nice and dandy. Now we want to get to the point where we can drag something off the action bar into space, remove it from our action bar, or drag something out of our inventory and completely remove it from our inventory. So dragging it and potentially dropping it back in the world, or spawning a new widget with a dialog box. Do you wish to destroy this object, sort of thing. We'll kind of set that up. For our purposes, when we drag off into the world, it's just going to delete it. But on that drop functionality, that's where you could add, spawn the item back in the world, or create a new widget to display a confirmation box, etc. So we're going to tackle both of those now. So about 30 more minutes, I guess. Should be able to do it. I feel confident. As long as I don't miss any connections, we should be good. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to the content browser. We're going to hop into the HUD widget blueprint now. So we're going to double click, open that up. And for this, what we're going to do, let me get my notes here. Let's close this up, open the HUD widget blueprint. First thing we're going to do is actually hop over to the event graph inside of our HUD widget blueprint here. So we're on the designer tab. We're going to hop to the graph actually. Going to kill this event tick because we don't need it. So I'm going to hit delete. Inside the graph, we're going to right click and we're going to say get player controller, like so. I'm going to drag off this now and cast to my player controller just so that we can access it. Connect this up like so. And we're going to promote this to a variable. It should feel right at home doing this now. So we're going to right click on that, promote to variable called controller reference. That's all the references that we need to get for here. So I'm just going to compile. Now, what we need to do is determine if we are coming from our action bar. So here's our action bar down here. If we are coming from our action bar, we're going to do one function. If we are dragging something from our inventory out into space, we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to create two functions to handle that. So let's go and do that. So we're going to hop over to the My Blueprint panel. First function that we're going to create, It's going to be called dropped item, so dropped item. Second function that we're going to create is going to be called remove from action bar, like so. And there's going to be some inputs and outputs on these. Actually, they're going to be one each, actually. So let's go ahead and do those real quick. So for the dropped item, we're going to add one input. This input is going to be an integer because we're going to need to know from which slot did we pull this that we are dropping. So we're going to say slot is the type. And we're going to do the same thing for remove from action bar. So remove from action bar, just going to add an input of the integer type called slot. Now, with both of those functions created, before we do anything else and before we forget, we're going to go to our onDrop function here. So inside of our onDrop function, go ahead and double click, open that up. Here's our graph for when we want to drop something. Currently, it's handling when we want to drop widgets. So when we are pulling our action bar around, when we are pulling our inventory menu around, that's currently what we're handling with this script here. So I'm going to actually add a comment around all of this, hit C and say moving interface, so interface elements, like so. So let's move this over just a little bit, move this back. So in the event that we are not moving interface elements, our action bar or inventory, we are moving items, at that point our cast would fail. So this is where we're going to call a different set of script here. And what we're going to do is off our onDrop here, we're going to take our operation and we're going to check, are we performing an item drag? So we're going to drag off our operation here and say cast to item drag, like so. And we're going to connect our failed here, like so. And now we need to hook up what happens when we are performing an item drag. So first thing that we're going to check as part of our item drag, we are checking, are we coming from the inventory? So we're going to get from inventory is what we're looking for. This will tell us if we are pulling an item from our inventory or pulling it from the action bar. And we're going to use that to determine which of these two functions we're going to call. So we're going to hold B, left click, create a branch, hook up our branch, like so. Hook up the executable to our branch, like so. And then the last thing that we're going to need for this part is our slot index. We're going to drag off the item drag here, get slot index. So get slot index, what we're looking for, because we're going to pass that through to our two functions. So we can take both of our functions in now, our dropped item, just left click, drag in dropped item. Take our remove from action bar, left click, drag that in, like so. So if we are coming from our inventory, this is where we're going to drop the item. If we are not coming from our inventory, then we're just going to remove the item from our action bar. So we need to tell it which slots we're coming from. So we're just going to take our slot index and plug that into both of these. So something like that. So let's add a comment around all this, and we're saying this is used when dragging an item from action bar or inventory. So the last thing we need to do is connect up our outputs to let it know it's been handled. So off of our dropped item here, just connect that into the return node. So same thing with our remove. So we're going to take this and just connect that up like so. So we can compile. Our onDrop is handled, but now we need to do the functionality for when we decide to drop an inventory item, as well as when we decide to remove an item from our action bar. Now to remove the item from the action bar is pretty simple, so we'll do that first and then we'll come back to the drop item. So I'm going to double click on the remove from action bar function. It will take us to our function here that we have. And let's go ahead and set this up. This is going to be pretty simple actually. All we're going to do, take our action bar, hold control, drag that into the graph, drag off of it and say get action buttons. Action buttons, like so. So get our action buttons. And we want to get one of those buttons. So we're going to drag off this array here, perform a get. It's asking for the index. It's going to come from our slot. So we can plug that in, like so. Let's move this over. And once we've determined the slot that we are going to affect, all we need to do is drag off of this and say set action image and nullify it. So we're going to set action image, nullify it so it's empty, like so. Connect this up. And then whenever we nullify an image, we do want to make sure that we set the default button style to those grayed out buttons. So we're going to drag off of this again, and we're going to say get button, I'm going to hop down to the action slot here, make sure that we actually get the button like so. We're going to drag off this one more time, and we're going to say get default button style. So get default button style. So. And then off of our button, we are setting style. So set style. So connect this up and plug that into our style. So this is used for removing an item from our action bar. So compile, and we'll test this in just a moment. The last thing that we need to do actually is our on dropped for dropping an actual item. So here's our on drop. We've set this script up. We now need to set this up. So let's double click our dropped item. What do we do in this case here? This is a little bit more involved. There's about 3 mini scripts that we need to set up for handling this. We first need to determine when we pull something from our inventory, is that item on our action bar? And if it is, we're probably going to want to remove it from our action bar as well, just so that it's not there and then it's not in our inventory menu. So we would have the item on our action bar, but not actually in our inventory. So we're going to need to check where that item is on our action bar. So that's the first thing that we need to do. Once we do that, then we're going to take all of those buttons that is using that item and set the button style to null, and the default button. The default button style is what we're going to be setting. So setting that action image to null to nullify it, setting the button style to its default button style. And then the last thing that we need to do is remove the item from our inventory menu, as well as remove the item from our actual quote unquote bag. So that's what we're going to do here. And then we should be able to test this. So let's go ahead and do this. We are inside of the dropped item function. There's a couple local variables that we're going to create for this. So click the add local variable button. First one's going to be called local slot. I'm going to add another one. This one's going to be called used action slots. So which buttons on our action bar are using this item that we're going to be dropping. I'm going to add another one called local image. So our local slot is just going to be an integer. So we change this to an integer type. And our used action slots is actually going to be of the action slot type. So we're using the action slot type here, and it's going to be an array because we could have multiple buttons on our action bar where we've assigned this particular item that we're dropping, and we're going to want to remove that. So the last thing that we need to do is set the local image here. We're going to set this to a texture 2D. So texture 2D, like so. So let's go ahead and work on the script here. What we're going to do, take our local slot, connect that up like so, make sure it's connected. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our inventory menu here, hold Control, drag that into the graph. We're going to drag off of it now, and we're going to get inventory buttons. So get inventory buttons, like so. Once we have this, we're going to get one of those. So we're going to get one of those. And the one that we want to get is going to correspond to the slot that we're passing through here. So we're going to take our local slot and just drop that on like so. Once we have that, we can drag off of this and say get inventory image. So, and that's going to be our local image so that we have a reference to it. So take our local image here, just drop that on top of our inventory image like so. And then we're going to connect that up like so. So let's actually work on removing the items, or first getting the action bar buttons that use this particular item we are dropping. So to do that, we're going to hold Control, take our action bar, drag that into the graph, then going to drag off of it and say get action buttons. So get all of our action buttons. Because we're going to want to run a check on it. That check that we're going to run is called a for each loop. So for each of our action buttons, we just stack those underneath like so. Connect our set to the for each loop like so, so it should look like that. And what we're going to do, off the array element here, we're going to drag off this and say get action image. Image, yeah. Get the action image. Is this value equal? So we're going to drag off this and hit equal sign. So equal object. Is it equal to the image that we are dropping? So in essence, the item that we are dropping. Now this is where things can get a little tricky, especially if you're using a system where you could have multiple items inside of your inventory using the same image. You probably wouldn't take this route. For our purposes, I think this is fine. We are setting a system up where each individual item will have its own unique thumbnail. But again, if you are using something where you have something that could populate your inventory with the same image, this could be problematic. Just wanted to mention that as food for thought. So once we've determined this aspect here, we're going to hold B and left click, create a branch, connect up our condition like so, connect up our loop body to our branch. We've determined that an action button is in fact using the same image that we are dropping, the item that we are dropping. Once we have determined that, we're going to hold control, take in our used action slot here, and we're going to add to it. So we're going to drag off of this now and say add. So just add. And we're going to add that array element like so. So just go ahead and plug that in. So this will give us all the buttons that have the same image of the item that we are dropping, to which we can then set the style for those, set the image to be null, and effectively remove those from our action bar. So I'm going to add a comment around this and hit C and just say gets all action buttons using the dropped item, like so. Now what we need to do, there's two more things we need to do in here. We're going to take all those action buttons now that we've just set here, hold control, drag that into the graph. We're going to create another for each loop, so I'm just going to hit Control C and Control V to paste that one, plug it into our array like so, and we're going off the completed. So once we've done all of our buttons off the completed here, we're then going to call the script to handle removing the images and setting the default style. So for each of those buttons, we're going to set the style now and nullify the image. We're dragging off the array element, set action image is what we're looking for. Just going to leave it blank to nullify it. So I'm going to drag off this again and get button. Again, we're using the action slot button, so this one here. Probably we would have created a function to handle this, to kind of streamline this process, which I may do for the released version of this, but we're almost done. So take the array element, let's drag off of this again and say get default button style. So the default button style there. Take our button, set style, like so. We are now setting the style back to its default style. So let's connect that up, and connect this up, like so. So I'm going to add a quick comment around this and just say reset all buttons that use the dropped item. Then off the completed, last bit of business we need to do is remove the item from our inventory menu. Once we remove it from our inventory menu, we then need to remove the item from our actual inventory quote unquote bag. So to do this is going to be pretty easy. Let's just take our inventory menu here. I'm going to hold control, drag that into the graph, drag off of it now and say get inventory buttons, like so. Going to get from it. So just going to search for getting the local slot again. So just plug that in like so. And from that, we're just going to set inventory image now. Same thing that we did with the action image. We're just nullifying this now. So set inventory image is what we're looking for. So set inventory image, like so. And we're connecting that off the completed here. So just go ahead and plug that in like so. Now we didn't do any styling for our inventory buttons. If you wanted to do that, it would be very similar to what we've done up here. But we didn't do that for our purposes, but you can feel free to go ahead and do that. Last thing that we need to do actually is take our controller reference, hold control, drag that into the graph, drag off of it, and get the inventory objects. So our array of everything that we're holding, so our inventory objects there, we're now going to drag off of this and say remove index. So remove index. And then we're going to connect the out like so. And it's asking for an index input. Just kind of range these a little bit. It's going to be the local slot variable. So we take this, plug that in like so. So now if we add a comment around this, hit C and just say remove from inventory, and let's say remove from inventory menu and remove from inventory quote unquote bag, like that. So I think that's it. Let's actually test this. Make sure we did our on drop. We already did all that. Let's actually test this. So if we play in the editor, go and pick up an item, we press I, bring up our inventory, we drag it down to our action bar, like so. We take it off our action bar, drop it into the world. Our buttons look a little bit different, but we'll fix this at the very end. I was expecting that. But what we've been able to do now, it didn't remove it from our inventory, just removed it from our action bar, which is what we want. So we can drag it in any slot, just drag it right off into the world, removes it. Now say we have this here, say we have this way over here, and say we have it right there too. Now we take it from our inventory. Well, I guess I should demo this too. We can take this off. Those still remain. That one goes away because we pulled that one off. But if we pulled this one off of our inventory, and again, this is where you would want to run that check. Are you sure you want to delete this item or spawn the item in the world when we drag it off our inventory? It should remove it from both of our action slots too. So let's go ahead and try that. We drag it off, which it did. So it removed it from our action bar and removed it from our inventory, regardless of which slot it was in. So our logic is set up. That's pretty much the gist of the system, but there's still one more thing that we're going to try to tackle here in the next 10 minutes. So we'll try and get through this real quick. What happens when we pull an item down to our inventory and we want to press 1 on our keyboard, because this is typically 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We press 1 on our keyboard and we want something to happen, and we want this item to go away, potentially removing it from our inventory as well. Let's try and set that up in this final 10 minutes here, and then we'll wrap up with any questions. It looks like we're good on questions. There's a couple that I may be able to get to. We'll see on time here, but I want to try and finish this here. So we've done a lot of work. Let's go ahead and finish it up. So to do this, what we're going to do is inside of our project here, we're going to go to the blueprints folder. We're going to go to our pickup now. So go ahead and double click, open up our pickup. Inside of our pickup on the event graph, we're just going to add a custom event. So we're going to right click, add a custom event. And this custom event is just going to be called do stuff, because I can't think of a better name. So I think do stuff is an appropriate name. Whatever is connected to this will get executed when you use the item, whether it be spawn something in the world, whether it be equip something, whether it be pass or update our health variables for our player character. Whatever is connected to this will get executed. For our purposes, we're just going to right click and print screen and say, or print string, let's just call it do cool stuff, right? Something like that. So let's go ahead and compile. We can actually close this pickup blueprint now. Next thing we need to do is hop over to our player controller actually. Let's close this as well. We're going to go into our player controller blueprint, double click, open that up. Make sure that we are on the event graph here. Get my notes, get that up. So on the event graph, actually this is very short on the event graph. What we're going to do, we're going to right click, create a custom event called use, or I guess we need to create a custom event first. So custom event, we'll call this use item event. And it's going to need an input for this. So we're going to go over and make sure that we add an input for this. So let's add an input. This input is going to be of the integer type, so, and it's just going to be called slot, because we're passing through, whether we are pressing 1, 2, 3, 4 on our keyboard, we're passing that through to our player controller here, essentially. It's giving us an error. If we compile, it'll go away. Get out of there. So we've created a custom event. Just for the sake of tidiness, we're not going to do all of our script in here. We're actually going to create one more function. Actually, we already created that function. We called it item was used. So let's go ahead and drag that item was used into our graph. It's asking for a slot used. We're going to pass that through, connect this up, connect that up. That's all we need to do on our event graph. Last thing that we need to do in our player controller is set up what happens when the item is used. So double click on this. So here's our script for that. And for this, we're going to create a couple more local variables. I know they're your favorite. So we're going to go ahead and create a couple of those. It's called local action slot. Create another one. This one's going to be called local inventory slot. One more. This one's going to be the local image. So I'm going to change the properties of these now, or the variable type. So for the local action slot, this is going to be an integer. So make this an integer. We'll also make this an integer as well. Oops. It would probably help if I selected the next one. So I'll make both of those integers like so. The local image is going to be a texture 2D. So texture 2D. So connect that up. And now we need to handle what happens when the item is actually used. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do, right click. Let's say or not right click. Let's hold control and take in our character reference here. Just hold control, drag that into the graph. Drag off of this and say get HUD reference. So get a reference to our game HUD. That down. Once we have this, we can say get action bar. So we're getting the action bar at that point. Once we have that, we're going to say get action buttons. So we have our action buttons. And what we're going to do for this is drag off of this and perform a get from one of those. And the index that we are getting is what we're passing through. So we're going to go ahead and connect that up like so. We do also need to take in our local action slot before I forget. Let's take this in, connect that up to here as well. So I'm just dropping it right on top like so, which automatically connects it for us, which is very handy. Back to our get here, we're going to drag off of this now, and we're going to say get action image. And this is going to start to look familiar to what we've done a minute ago. And then for our action image, that's going to be the local image. So let's take our local image here, drag and drop that on top like so, and connect this up like so. Now what we need to do is determine inside of our inventory object, so our actual bag, where the particular item is. Because we can move things around inside of our bag, we need to locate that item inside of our bag. So what we're going to do for this, we're going to hold control, take in our inventory objects here, drag off of it now, and say for each loop. Actually, for each loop with break is what we're looking for, because once we find it, we'll be done. So for each loop with break, what we're looking for. Going to take the set, plug that in, like so. And what we'll do now is drag off our array element here, drag off this, and say cast to pickup. So we're casting to our pickup at this point, taking our loop body, plugging that in. And off of our pickup, we're dragging off the as pickup here. We're going to say get pickup image. So we get the pickup image. And we're checking this versus the passed through image here. So our local image, we're checking that. We're checking it against that is what I'm trying to say here. So similar to what we did before, we're going to drag off the pickup image here, hit an equal sign, equal object is what we're looking for. We're going to take our local image, connect that up. So hold B, left click, create a branch. That's going to be our condition. Almost done. Let's connect the pickup to our branch like so. Once we find the item that we've selected to use inside of our inventory objects, we're then going to drag off this pickup here and call that custom event we called do stuff. So go ahead and do stuff for us, because that's the magic of this system, right? So let's plug in our true, connect it up like so. Once we decided to do stuff, this is where, again, my neatness goes completely out the window. Take our do stuff, plug that all the way back here to our break, so we stop looking for that item, and we are set. Last thing that we need to do now, we need to take our local inventory slot here. So I'm going to hold Alt, drag that into the graph, like so. And take our completed from our for each loop with break, connect that up, like so. And we're going to set the array index to equal our local inventory slot. So we've decided where this item is, we're breaking, we're getting the location of that, passing that through here, because we're going to need this to determine when we remove the item where that is. So let's actually do that. So over in the My Blueprint panel, we created that function called remove item. So go ahead and drag that into the graph, like so. And we're going to connect this up, like so. We're going to connect our inventory slot to the inventory slot. The action slot is going to be our local action slot. So we're going to connect that. And the local image, we're going to connect that up like that. So we can compile. We've got to go into the remove item, which I forgot about. We need to do that. So I'll try to get to this as quickly as I can here. So here's our remove item function. We've determined that we want to use the item. We're now going to go through the process of removing it. So I'm going to double click on this remove item. We need to set this script up, and then we need to hop into the player character, do one quick thing to allow them to press a button to call the event to kick all of this off, and then we should be done at that point. So what we'll do for this, let's drag this down again. A couple quick local variables, just again, local inventory slot, so local inventory slot. Let's add one more, local action slot. one more local image so that we have one for each. Let's change the types of these. This is an integer, not a byte, really. Integer. This is also an integer. And finally, this is, that's fine as it is, actually, a texture 2D. So let's plug those in. So we pass those through, like so. Got to make sure that I connect these because I don't want to fail again right here at the end. So let's make sure that those are connected, like so. So. Connect this up like so. So what we need to do is nullify the object on the action bar wherever it is used. Once we've done that, we need to nullify the object on the inventory menu and then remove the item from our actual inventory. We set this up for when we dropped items, but now we're setting it up for when we actually use an item, which is a little bit different. We probably could have kind of unified this, which we may investigate for a more streamlined version of this, but this will get us through. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our controller reference, or our character reference here, hold control, drag that into the graph, drag off of this, and say get HUD reference now. So get our HUD reference, drag off of this, get action bar. Once we have our action bar, drag off this, get action buttons, like so. So we have all of our buttons now. And we're going to run a for each on this. So let's just drag off this for each loop. So let's connect this up like so. And we're going to drag off the array element here and say get action image. We're then going to verify if that is equal to the item that we use. So we're going to do an equal sign, equal. We're going to take our local image that we're passing through, connect that in. Going to hit B or hold B and left click, create a branch. Connect that up as the condition. Connect our loop body to the branch, like so. And once we have determined that our action bar is using the item that we actually used, what we're then going to do is drag off our array element and set action image, kind of like we've been doing. Leave it to null. So drag off this one more time and say get button, get the actual button. So our button, not the function, the actual button. Drag off of this, set style. So that we can set it back to its default setting. So one more time, dragging off of this, get button or get default style. So get default button style, that's going to be the style that we assign to our widget. Two more things we need to do in here, and then one inside of our player controller, and we are done. So for this, let's take our character reference and our HUD here. Just going to select both of those, hit Control C, come down here and hit Control V. Because now we're going to get the inventory menu, so get inventory menu, like so. Once we have our menu, then we could drag off of this and say get inventory buttons. So get our inventory buttons there. For this, what we're going to do is get one of those. So we're going to get from here. The item that we are getting is our local inventory slot. So we're going to drag that in, connect it like so, something like this. Once we have that, we're then going to set inventory image. So set inventory image to null. So we're connecting off the completed here. Set that to null. And then finally, what we need to do, what we're going to do actually, since we have our inventory objects here, I'm just going to hold control, drag that into the graph, drag off of it and say set array element. Set array element, like so. Connect the set to that, like so. Index is going to be the local inventory slot. Connect that up, so. And we're going to leave it null, so it just empties it out for us. So our My Player controller is set up. The last thing that we need to do before we can test this whole system out is provide a way for the player to actually press a button on the keyboard to actually activate and kick off this whole script. So let's go and do that before we can test here. So what we're going to do is go down to our first-person character or third-person character, whatever character blueprint you're using. We're on the event graph. Just going to find an empty spot. Going to right-click, and for our purposes, I'm just going to enter 1. So whenever 1 is pressed, right-click, enter 2. Whenever 2 is pressed, right-click, 3. Whenever 3 is pressed. Now you could do 4, 5, 6, 7, however many action buttons you have. In the interest of time, I think you'll get the idea once we do 1, 2, and 3 here. So all we're going to do is create one quick function. So let's add a function. This function is going to be called useActionBar. So we've decided to use something on our action bar. It's going to take in an input. So I'm going to click this new button, and it's going to be an integer. So change it to a slot, like so. If I compile, and I hop back to our graph now, we can take that function that we just created, drag it into the graph. Now whenever 1 is pressed, we will call this function. We can specify the slot, like so. So for slot 1, because it's 0 based, we're going to want to access the 0 index. For number 2 here, if I hit Control C and Control V to paste this, connect this up, like so. This is actually going to be 1 now because it's 0 based. Hit Control C and Control V, paste that, and this will be 2. Not 21, but 2. So if you had 4, 5, and 6, 4 would be 3, 5 would be 4, etc. But I think you get the idea. So now all we have to do is do our action bar function here, and we are ready to test and wrap this up. So let's double click on this, add the script for this. First thing that we want to check is make sure that the player actually has something in their action bar. So when they press 1, I'm not going to execute any script unless they have something there. So to do this, I'm going to hold Control, taking our HUD reference here, and drag off this and say get action bar. I'm going to drag off the action bar now and say get action buttons, because we want to get one of those. So I'm going to drag off of this now, form a get. So just a get, like so. What we are going to get is the actual slot. So I'm just going to pass that through instead of creating a local variable. So I think that's fine. Once we get that, we're going to drag off this and say is valid. So is it valid? If it isn't valid, then we're not going to allow the player to execute anything. So I'm going to hold B and left click to create a branch, connect up our condition, connect up the executable. So if there is nothing inside of our action bar, then we're going to call the false and not do anything. If there is, all we're going to do is hold Control, take in our controller reference, call that function that we created, which was called useItem. UseItem event is what we called it. So useItem event, which in turn calls item was used. So we're going to use item event. Connect this up. And then finally connect our slot. We need to specify the slot, which is going to get passed through. I'm so used to creating local variables. We're just going to plug that in like so. And this is coming again from our event graph. Whenever we click on one of these buttons, that's getting passed through. So with all of that, that should be it. Let's actually test this. Well, one more thing. Let's go to our pickup here, just for the sake of showing you how you can have multiple pickups, do different things. Just going to click on our pickup here, right click on it, create a child of that. So create a child blueprint. This is a little bit of extra credit here, so I kind of wanted to just do it. We'll call it pickup 2, like so. So this is a different pickup that could do different things. Double click on it, open it up. And in here, we can go to the components and change the mesh, what it looks like. So we can scroll down to the details panel, choose a different mesh, for example. We could pick something like this, and we can change the size. We'll just say 0.25 all around, something like this. We could also, if we go to the event graph, let's see, scroll down a little bit. Go to the event graph here, kill all of this, and right click on our graph. We can now say do stuff, because this is inheriting from the parent blueprint, which has all this functionality built in, has the functionality for picking up the item, has all that built in for us. All we want to do is override what happens when we do something. So we can say event do stuff. Now in this blueprint, whenever we pick this item up and choose to execute this, we could do something different. So we could say print string, and in this case, we could say, for example, give us health, or spawn an item, etc. So if we compile, save, close this blueprint, we could drag this into our level. It has a different appearance now. We can actually go down to the details panel, pick a different thumbnail as well. So I'm going to do that. Click this drop down, just pick any random one, like so. So now with all of that, if we play, there's our pickups. So we have these 2 items. I can pick this up, pick this up, and we can pick this up. Press I, all 3 of those items have been added to our inventory. Swap things around inside of our inventory. Take those items down to our action bar. Take this one down, say down there. And this one here, if you recall, this is the one that's a little bit different. That was the one that was over here. So if we press 2 or 3, so we press 2, it says do cool stuff. Press 3, do cool stuff again. If we press 1 now, give us health or spawn an item. So it executes a different logic because it's a child, and we wrote what happens when we do stuff. So that shows you how you can set up different pickups. So all you would have to do is create a child of it, specify the static mesh that you want to use, provide the functionality for what you want the thing to do, whether it be equip an item or give you health, etc. But our system is set up. That is actually it. We did a lot actually in these 3 videos. Let's actually demo it one more time, make sure everything's working. The last thing that you'll probably do is go into the UI folder for your buttons here. If you go into the UI folder, you could probably go into the action bar or action slots and change the styling for those buttons to use not 0.4 all the way around, because we changed these, if you recall. We zeroed those out. So you could probably do that. That would be the other thing that I would showcase. But in the interest of time, our system is complete. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Again, you guys can feel free to add questions to this thread for this stream. I'll try and check in with those and see if I can answer those questions. That is actually going to do it for this trilogy of UMG drag and drop. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next stream.